Okay, so far we've shown you how to do harvesting with level 1 production on a planet, and then we've shown you how to do a level 2 only production planet. If you were going to do a level 3 production planet only, it would be the same exact setup as the level 2 only, because it uses the exact same factories as a level 2. If you were going to do a level 4 only, again, it would be the same setup, though the advanced factories use more power. So you would, in that instance, not be able to run as many factories on the planet. But the general concept is the same. So what we're going to show you now is actually a multi-step planet. So what we're going to do is we are going to build robotics. So what we are going to do is we're going to assume that we have level 1 products that have been produced. So in this case, reactive metals, precious metals, and toxic metals, and trill structures. So we're going to assume that those are going to be our inputs, because you can't actually find all 4 of these on one planet. So what we are going to need to do then is we're going to input these 4 materials, and we are going to make mechanical parts and consumer electronics, and then we are going to feed those directly into a second set of factories that will then produce robotics. So if we look at this, we can see that what we're going to need for inputs. So for each batch of mechanical parts in consumer electronics, we need 40 of each of the inputs, and we get 5 outputs for the finished product. For the robotics, we need 10 of the mechanical parts and 10 of the consumer electronics in order to make 3 robotics. That means we have to have 2 batches. So for every one of these factories, we need to have 2 of each one of these in order to feed this. So that tells us we need a 2-to-1 ratio for making these. If you look at these schematics here, you can see again for making the reactive metals, it shows us our inputs. We don't really care about those because again, those are going to be produced on the level 1 planets. So when we get to the mechanical parts, again, you can see I've simply translated this information up. To make a mechanical part, you need 40 reactive and 40 precious. Same thing for the toxic metals and trill structures. And then finally, the robotics, 10 and 10. So hopefully that'll make sense. So what we're going to do is we are going to want to set up another barren planet as a manufacturing planet, and we're going to want to take out our raw materials here. So I am going to go ahead and pause the video at this point. I'm going to get loaded up, and we'll resume at the planet to begin setup and construction. Okay, so we are now arriving at the second barren planet in the system, this time planet 7. We have warped directly to the customs office, which we are going to access, and we're going to open up our cargo hold. Okay, so you'll note that I've loaded exactly 23,026 of each of these materials, which is just shy of the 35,000 max capacity of the customs office. So I'm going to load those in, and then we are going to go and save up and begin our construction. So I'm just going to basically fly away from the customs office so I can cloak up. And it doesn't really matter because since we're on the test server, so I'm not even going to bother with the cloaking. I'm just going to fly away. So let's go to our planet view. All right, so again, we are going to set up our planet so that we're not in the way of other things, and very much like the other ones we've done previously. So I'm going to drop our command center here on the pole. Again, you can really put it anywhere you want. I just like to do this. Do a full upgrade on it. Submit that. Come down here to a nice open spot. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my launch pad first, and this is going to be my ingoing launch pad. Okay, so while I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and transfer down some of the material. So I can only transfer down about 1/3 of this, which in this case is going to be about 7,000 of each one of these, ballpark. And I was wrong about that, so let's just redo this. Let's try it with 6,500. All right, that works. So we're going to transfer that down to the planet, and we're good to go. Now, obviously, now that we have this transferred down, we are not going to want to throw that away or delete that, so make sure you have it where you want it before you start. So the next thing that we need to do is we are going to need to set up our factories. Now, if you'll remember with the level 2 planet that we were able to fit 2 spaceports and 22 factories. So with this production, what we're going to need, if you'll recall, is we're going to have 2 mechanical parts factories and 2 consumer electronics factories for each of the robotics. So that means we need a total of 5 factories to get 1 full cycle for the robotics. And since we know we can fit 22, that means we could do 4 setups. So also as a reminder, let's take a look at the factory. And you'll note that we do have the ability to do, from the advanced industry facility, consumer electronics, we can do our mechanical parts, and we can also do our robotics. You'll also note the cycle time for both the mechanical parts and consumer electronics are an hour, as is the robotics. If the robotics had a longer time cycle, we wouldn't need as many factories feeding it, but in this case we do need 2 to ensure that that as soon as the product is finished from the 2 mechanical parts and 2 consumer electronics, they can fully feed the robotics so that we don't end up with choke points in our production cycle. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed and put down the factories, and then we will resume the video once I have those in place. Okay, so at this point we've got our 20 factories down. We've got 8 for mechanical parts, we have 8 for consumer electronics, and we have 4 for robotics. So I'm going to go ahead and submit those in. So what we're going to want to do now is define what each factory is going to do. So I'm going to start with the 4 in the middle. I'm going to set them to my final product, which is robotics, and I'm going to route that out to our finished spaceport. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do links again. Let me do that real quick. So these 4 are going to go to the spaceport. So we're going to route this out. And we'll do the same with our other 3 here. I like to start at the end of the production chain and work my way back. It makes it easier to make sure that you have all of your routes and your flow set up correctly. Okay. And robotics. Okay. So those 4 are done. So now what we are going to need to do is set up the links between the feeders and the individual robotic systems. So these 2 mechanical parts are going to go to this robotics, these 2 are going to go to this one, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and start creating those links now. So again, I like to do one group at a time so I don't mess up. So I'm going to link this first one, and the same with these 2. And then we're going to repeat. Okay, so now that's done. Now I'm going to go through and define which each one of these is going to do. So these are mechanical parts at the top. Actually, I can do consumer electronics since that's the first one alphabetically. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to route it directly to the factory. So this is an area that's a little bit different. So in the past, we've sent product from a spaceport to a factory and then back out to a spaceport for storage. Since the level 2 production is immediately going to feed into the level 3 production, we're going to route it straight to the factory. Okay. So then we're going to do the same thing here, consumer electronics. We're going to route it to the factory. These are down here are going to be mechanical parts. Okay, and I'm just gonna go ahead and finish doing the other ones, and then we'll resume. Okay, so at this point we have all 20 of our factories defined. We do have enough power that if you wanted to spread these out a little bit, you do have enough power you could spread this out. I happen to like them close together. I find it easier to work on. So real quick, we're just going to spot check these. Each one of these robotics factories should have 4 incoming routes and 1 outgoing route currently. 2 consumer electronics, 2 mechanical parts, and an outgoing robotics. So we're just going to check each one of these, make sure that they're all set up correctly. They are. All right. So now the last thing that we need to do is route our raw products. Now it's important to remember that there are 4 raws, and 2 of them go to mechanical parts and 2 of them go to consumer electronics. So it's important that you route the correct ones to the correct location. So what we're going to do is open our products, and we're going to start with the consumer electronics. So for each of the consumer electronics factories, which are the ones at the top, we are going to want to route the chiral structures and the toxic metals. So we're going to create a route to each one of these. Oh, you know what? Again, I forgot my links. So we're going to need to create the links from here to each of the 8 factories at the top and the 8 factories at the bottom. So let me do that really quick. Again, I do this in a methodical manner so that I don't mess up and miss one. Okay, so I should see that I have 16 links here. Again, they're not doubled up. I want to make sure I don't have any duplicates. Okay, no duplicates. And 16, so that's correct. All right, so now we can route our products. So we'll start with the chiral structures, and we're going to do that to each of the 8 at the top. And again, you'll note the dark circles as you route products. It indicates that it has a route for the materials that it's expecting. The reason that we do not see that currently on the robotics is because there are no mechanical parts or consumer electronics in the system already. So it is not orange. Okay, so now we want to do the second half of the consumer electronics, which is the toxic metals. So we're going to do those now. Okay, so those are all done. Now we want to do the mechanical parts, so it's going to repeat the process for the reactive metals and the precious metals. So I'm going to pause, and I'll come back when that's done. Okay, so now we have all of our routes done. If we want, we can spot check all of our routes. We should see 64 routes leaving, or rather 32 routes leaving the first launch pad, 8 for each of the products. So I'll go ahead and get that out of our way. And within each group, you want to also easily look for duplicates, but that would require clicking on each one, which is kind of a pain in the ass, so just eyeball it. We'll know very quickly if anything is not correct because when we submit this, we should immediately see that all of the factories begin a production cycle. Okay, so all of these are now cooking. In production. Now you'll note the robotics are waiting for resources. So at this point, these 16 factories are going to take an hour to produce their materials, at which point they'll route them to the 4 robotics factories, while in hour 2, the first batch of robotics will be being made, and the second batch of ingoing products will be made. So the robotics factories are always an hour behind. So the last thing we can do is go back to our customs office and top off our tanks, as it were. So we can probably get, I think we had 6,000. So let's do 240 of each. I think that'll top us off. close enough. Probably could have done a little bit more. No big deal. So the factory rules will run. Again, this is a situation where periodically you're going to want to refill your customs office so that you can refill your ingoing launch pad. You'll note also we have our secondary launch pad, which is going to be where all of our robotics end up. So at some point you're going to need to empty this out as well, but that's going to be probably a few days down the road. So that's how you do a hybrid planet. You can also do a more complicated hybrid planet to make a level 4 item, but really if you try to cram too many different types of production on one planet, you lose efficiency. The one benefit of doing a combo hybrid planet like this is that because you're producing your level 2 and level 3 item on the same planet, you don't incur the import and export taxes and fees for dropping the items on the planet and bringing them back off. We're only getting hit when we put the level 1 products down, and we're only getting hit when we bring the level 3s up. If we did a separate level 2 and a separate level 3 planet, we would incur extra charges for those intermediary steps, even though the planets themselves would technically be more efficient because they're only having to do one product type. So right now we have enough power that we could be running 4 more factories here, but because we need 5, we aren't running those. So it's not as efficient as the other planets, but it's going to be a function of the amount of ISK that it costs. In a situation where you have 0% POCO tax, then obviously it doesn't matter, and so you can afford to have the more efficient planets running. But in systems where there is a POCO tax, this is sometimes a more cost-effective means to do production. So you'll need to evaluate the situation for where you're going to be doing your production and determine which method is going to be best for you. So that wraps up this video, and we'll see you on the next one.